I heard them while they were on the phone with the wedding planner, confirming the order for the ice sculptures. My daughter and her fiancé, they were laughing about how they finally got everything they wanted for me, the old woman, and how they wouldn't have to see me again after the wedding. They had no idea I was standing right behind the door, just like they had no idea that their fairy tale wedding was about to become their worst nightmare.
It arrived on a Tuesday of all things, the most ordinary, forgettable day of the week. I was in the kitchen of my small, sterile apartment, the kind of place with beige walls that seemed to absorb all sound and light. I was trying to decide if the single carton of milk in the fridge was worth saving. That's the kind of decision that fills your life after you sell the heart of it. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop, a sharp, intrusive sound in the quiet. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and picked it up, expecting it to be Jessica with another last-minute wedding emergency, a crisis over cocktail napkins, or the exact shade of ivory for the flower girl sash. My daughter's name, Jessica, glowed on the screen, but it wasn't a call. It was a text. My thumb hovered over the notification, a little knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. Her texts lately had been short, clipped, so different from the flood of excited emojis and exclamation points of a few months ago. I opened it. The words were simple, clean, and utterly devastating. Each one was a perfectly polished stone dropped onto the thin ice of my heart. Hi, Mom. Leo and I have been talking with his parents, and we've all decided it would be best if you didn't come to the wedding. It's just going to be a small family thing now, and we don't want any awkwardness. We'll celebrate with you another time. So sorry for any inconvenience. I read it once, then a second time. My brain refused to assemble the words into a coherent thought. It felt like a language I didn't understand, a cruel joke written in a familiar script. Small family thing? The wedding she had described for months was a 300-person affair at the Grand Oak Manor, a place where presidents had supposedly dined, a place that was costing more than the annual salary of my late husband, Tom, a place for which I had sold our home, the home where I had measured her height against a doorframe, where I'd nursed her through fevers, where the ghost of Tom's pipe tobacco still lingered in the study if you breathed in deep enough. Don't want any awkwardness. What awkwardness? My hands started to shake, and I had to set the phone down on the counter before I dropped it. I stared at my reflection in the polished black surface of the door-knit microwave. A woman of 58, with more gray in her hair than she'd had a year ago, with tired lines etched around her eyes. Lines of worry, of sacrifice, of love. A fool. That's who was looking back at me. A complete and utter fool. My first instinct was to call her, to hear her voice, to let her explain the typo, the misunderstanding, the hack that must have taken over her phone. I snatched the phone and pressed her number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. Jessica's bright, cheerful voice filled the silence. "Hey, you've reached Jessica. So sorry I can't take your call. I'm probably deep in wedding planning. Leave a message." The chipper, pre-recorded lie was a slap in the face. Deep in wedding planning, planning to exclude me. I hung up without leaving a message. What could I even say? "Hi, darling. Just got your text. Did you mean to send that to someone you hate?" I sank onto one of the cold, modern bar stools that came with the furnished apartment. My gaze drifted around the room. It was all temporary, transient. The generic art on the walls, the soulless gray sofa. Nothing in here held a memory. My memories were all packed away in boxes in a storage unit. Waiting for what? Waiting for me to find a new life after I had gleefully torched my old one on the altar of my daughter's happiness. Just 6 months ago, Jessica had sat in the cozy, worn armchair in our living room, the one with the faint floral pattern Tom had picked out. Her eyes were shining with tears as she showed me the brochure for the Grand Oak Manor. Leo, her fiancé, sat beside her, looking smug. His family had money, old money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. Leo was a nice enough boy, I suppose, but he had the quiet arrogance of someone who had never wanted for anything. "It's perfect, Mom. It's the only place I've ever dreamed of getting married," she'd whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I'd looked at the price list she'd conveniently left on the coffee table. The numbers swam before my eyes. The venue fee alone was more than my entire retirement fund. I was a widow on a modest pension, a part-time librarian. I couldn't afford a single one of the manicured hedges at the Grand Oak Manor, let alone the whole estate for a weekend.
Honey, it's beautiful. It truly is. But the cost? I'd started, my voice gentle. Leo had cleared his throat. Eleanor and Richard, my parents, they feel that the wedding should reflect, well, both our families. They're contributing, of course, but they believe the bride's family should handle the venue. It's traditional. Traditional? His mother, Eleanor, was a woman carved from ice. We'd met twice. The first time, she'd surveyed my small, lovingly kept home with a look of faint pity. The second time, over dinner at a restaurant I couldn't afford, she had asked me what I did, and when I told her I was a librarian, she'd simply smiled a tight, bloodless smile and said, "How quaint." She was the source of the awkwardness. I was the unpolished, middle-class mother-in-law who didn't fit into their glossy family portrait. Jessica's face had crumpled. "I knew it was too much to ask," she'd sobbed. "It's fine. We'll just go to the courthouse. It's what we can afford. I wanted one perfect day. The kind of day Eleanor had. The kind of day all my friends will have." Every tear was a perfectly aimed arrow into my heart. I was her mother. My one job, the one I dedicated my life to since Tom died, was to make her happy, to protect her from disappointment. And in that moment, watching her manufactured despair, I saw only one solution. It was a crazy, reckless, terrifying solution, but it was the only one I could see. "I'll get the money," I'd said, the words leaving my mouth before I had fully processed them. Jessica's head snapped up, her tears instantly vanishing. "What? How?" "The house," I said, the word tasting like ash. "The house is paid off. It's worth a lot now. I can sell it." Leo's eyes widened. Jessica launched herself at me, wrapping me in a hug that felt less like affection and more like a victory lap. "Oh, Mommy, you would do that for me? Really? You're the best mother in the entire world. I'll pay you back, I swear. Every single penny, once Leo gets his promotion." I knew, even then, that the promise of repayment was an empty one. But it didn't matter. Seeing the radiant, triumphant smile on her face felt like enough. I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. The house was too big for me anyway, I reasoned. The memories were becoming ghosts. A fresh start would be good. I repeated these lies to myself over and over again, a mantra to drown out the screaming voice of reason in the back of my mind. So I did it. I called a realtor, a brisk, efficient woman who saw only square footage and market value, not the place where I had lived and loved for 35 years. I packed up my life into cardboard boxes, each one a little paper cut on my soul. I watched as another family, a young couple with bright, hopeful eyes, walked through my front door and called it their own. The day I signed the final papers, a check with an obscene number of zeros was placed in my hand. It felt like the heaviest thing I had ever held. The next day, I transferred the entire amount for the venue into a wedding account we had set up. Gone, just like that. Jessica was ecstatic. For a few weeks, I was her hero. She'd call me every day, bubbling with plans. We'd go dress shopping, taste cakes, and argue playfully over floral arrangements. I was living in this soulless apartment, eating microwave dinners, but it felt worth it. I was a part of her perfect day. Then she met with Eleanor to choose the invitations, and the calls started to slow down. "Eleanor doesn't think hydrangeas are very classic, Mom. We're going with white orchids." "Eleanor found a much better caterer, Mom. Don't worry, they're only a little more expensive." "Eleanor thinks my dress needs a different neckline. She's taking me to her personal seamstress." I was being gently, politely, and systematically erased from the wedding I had sold my life to fund. I was the silent partner, the anonymous benefactor, the awkwardness.
And now, this text. It wasn't a gentle erasure anymore. It was an execution. I sat there on that stool for what felt like hours, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. The grief came first, a tidal wave of it, so powerful it left me breathless. My daughter, my little girl, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, had just carved me out of her life with a text message. The betrayal was a physical pain, a hot poker twisting in my gut. But then, slowly, something else began to bubble up through the grief. It was cold and hard and sharp. It was anger. A clean, clarifying rage I hadn't felt in years. I thought about the scratch on the doorframe in my old house, the one marking Jessica's height at age 6. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up with her, helping with homework, and the money I'd saved for her college fund instead of fixing the leaky roof. I thought of Tom and how he would have been so horrified, so utterly broken by his daughter's casual cruelty. I had given my daughter the world, or at least my world, and she had traded it all for white orchids and the approval of a woman who thought I was quaint. The text message had said, "So sorry for any inconvenience." I picked up my phone again. My hands were perfectly steady now. The screen lit up, showing her callous words. An inconvenience? Selling my home, my past, my security was an inconvenience? A slow smile spread across my face, but it wasn't a happy one. It was the smile of a woman who had just been pushed too far. A woman who had nothing left to lose. "All right, Jessica," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's talk about inconvenience." My fingers flew across the screen, not to my daughter, but to my contacts list. I scrolled past her name, past the real estate agent, past the few friends I had left. I stopped at a name I had saved under W for wedding. The Grand Oak Manor. I pressed the call button. A pleasant, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Good afternoon, Grand Oak Manor. This is Catherine speaking. How may I help you?" "Hello, Catherine," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the granite countertop. "My name is Helen Graham. I'm calling about the reservation for the Sterling Graham wedding on October 25th. There was a pause, the sound of clicking keys. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Graham, a beautiful choice. Is there a problem?" I looked at my daughter's text one last time. "It's just going to be a small family thing now." "No problem at all," I said. "I'm just calling to cancel it. Everything. The venue, the catering, the bar service. All of it. Effective immediately." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could hear the faint, ambient noise of a busy office, another phone ringing in the distance, the soft murmur of voices. But Catherine herself was completely still. I pictured her in a smart blazer, a perfectly polite smile frozen on her face, her mind racing to find the right page in her customer service script for this particular brand of insanity. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Cancel, Mrs. Graham? I'm afraid I don't understand. The event is less than 3 weeks away." "Yes, I'm aware of the date," I said, my tone unchanging. I was holding the phone so tightly my knuckles were white, but my voice was a frozen lake. "My circumstances have changed. The wedding is no longer proceeding as planned." "I see," she said, her voice laced with professional caution. "Well, I am terribly sorry to hear that. However, I do need to make you aware of our cancellation policy. At this late stage, the entirety of your payment is non-refundable. That's a sum of," I heard her keyboard click again, $175,000. She said the number as if it were a weapon designed to shock me back to my senses. 6 months ago, hearing that number would have made me faint. Now it was just a number. It was the price of a house, the price of a lesson. "Yes, I've read the contract. I am fully aware that the money is forfeit. That is acceptable to me," I said. This time, her silence was one of genuine astonishment. Mrs. Graham, are you certain? Perhaps you'd like to speak with the bride and groom first? We could possibly reschedule. That will not be necessary, I cut in, my voice sharper now. I am the sole signatory on this contract. The payment was made from my account. I am the one making the cancellation. Is my instruction not clear? No, it's perfectly clear, she stammered, all pretense of salesmanship gone. I will process the cancellation right away. You will receive an email confirmation within the hour. Thank you, Catherine, I said, and I ended the call. I placed the phone back on the counter, my hand perfectly steady. I had just set fire to a fortune large enough to buy a new house, a new car, a new life, and I felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. I felt a strange, cold peace settle over me. The rage from moments before had cooled, solidifying into something hard and durable. Steel. The steel that had been missing from my spine for the last year. I stood up and walked to the window of my sterile apartment that overlooked a parking lot and a strip mall. It was the bleakest view imaginable. But for the first time since I'd moved in, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. The money was gone, but so was the obligation. So was the desperate need for my daughter's approval. So was the ghost of Eleanor's condescending smile. I had bought my daughter a dream, and she had tried to evict me from it. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I still held the deed. My work wasn't finished. The venue was the heart of the beast, but there were other limbs. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts. My next call was to a woman named Genevieve, a ridiculously expensive photographer whose specialty was making ordinary people look like royalty. Her deposit alone had been $10,000. Genevieve, hello, it's Helen Graham. Helen, darling, I was just thinking about you. We need to finalize the shot list for the big day. Her voice boomed through the phone. There's been a change of plans, Genevieve. The wedding is off. Off? What do you mean, off? Darling, this is my masterpiece. The lighting at the manor in October? To die for. Nevertheless, it's off. Please cancel the booking. Again, there was the talk of non-refundable deposits. Again, I calmly agreed. I could hear the gears turning in her head, the society photographer smelling a juicy piece of gossip. Oh, my dear, is it the groom? She whispered conspiratorially. It's a family matter, I said, giving her nothing. Thank you for your time. I hung up before she could ask another question. Next, the florist, a man named Antoine, who had looked down his nose at my suggestion of hydrangeas and spoke of white orchids as if they were a religious calling. The deposit for covering the Grand Oak Manor in his ethereal white blossoms was another $20,000. Gone. I left him a voicemail. Cool, concise, and utterly final. Then came the biggest one. The final, spectacular gift I had lavished upon my ungrateful child, her honeymoon. 2 weeks in an overwater bungalow in Bora Bora, a trip that had cost more than my car. A trip I had booked and paid for in full. A surprise I had tearfully revealed to her and Leo over dinner 2 months ago. She had screamed with delight. I dialed the number for the high-end travel agency. Hello, this is Helen Graham. I'm calling about booking number 74J Alpha. I went through the now familiar dance. The surprise, the condolences, the gentle reminder of the financial penalties. So, you're clear, Mrs. Graham. If you cancel the package now, you will be forfeiting the entire amount. We can offer you a credit for future travel, valid for 1 year. And that's when a new idea, a brilliant and beautiful idea, began to form in my mind. A future travel credit? For me? Actually, I said, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time all day, I won't be canceling. I'd like to make a change to the booking. Of course, the agent said, relieved. What's the change? The reservation is for 2 people, correct? Mr. Leo Sterling and Miss Jessica Graham? That's right. I'd like to change the names on the booking, I said, walking over to the sad little refrigerator.
I pulled out the carton of milk and, without checking the date, poured it down the sink. Just one? The agent asked, confused. Just one, I confirmed, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The name on the ticket should be Helen Graham.
After hanging up with the travel agent, an almost giddy sense of calm washed over me. The phone lay silent on the counter, a dormant black rectangle that had, in the span of an hour, become both the weapon and the key. For the rest of the afternoon, I did nothing. I didn't pace, I didn't cry, I didn't ruminate. I just sat on the soulless gray sofa and listened to the quiet. It was a different kind of quiet now, not the lonely, oppressive silence of before, but a clean, empty space, a blank page. Over the next 2 days, the silence held. It was magnificent. I imagined Jessica and Leo wrapped up in their own world, blissfully unaware. They probably thought I was at home, weeping into a cup of tea, wounded and compliant, as I had always been. The thought that I would do anything other than meekly accept my dismissal would never have crossed their minds. My compliance was a foundational assumption of their world. The storm broke on Thursday evening. I had just finished eating a surprisingly decent salad. I'd gone to the grocery store and bought fresh vegetables, a small act of self-care that felt revolutionary, when my phone began to vibrate violently against the kitchen table. It was Jessica. Of course it was Jessica. I let it ring, watching her picture flash on the screen. It was a photo of us from a few years ago on a trip to the coast. We were both smiling, squinting in the sun. For a moment, a pang of the old grief hit me. I almost didn't answer. But I had to. This was the final act. I took a deep breath and answered on the fourth ring. "Hello, Jessica." "Mom, what did you do?" It wasn't a question. It was a shriek, high-pitched and ragged with panic. I could hear other voices in the background, a man's low murmur, probably Leo, and a woman's sharp, imperious tones. Eleanor. The whole coven was assembled. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, my voice infuriatingly placid. "The manor! I called the manor to confirm the final head count for the rehearsal dinner, and they said it was canceled. They said you canceled it. All of it. Mom, this has to be a mistake. You have to call them back. You have to fix this right now." "There's no mistake, Jessica," I said calmly. "I canceled the reservation." A strangled sob came through the phone. "Why? Why would you do that? You've ruined everything. My wedding is in 2 weeks. Everything is gone." "Well, you told me you wanted a small family thing," I said, quoting her text message. The words were like ice chips in my mouth. "And you said you didn't want any awkwardness. I assumed that a 300-person party at the Grand Oak Manor wasn't what you had in mind anymore. I was just trying to accommodate your new plans." "That's not what I meant, and you know it!" she screamed. "You're doing this to punish me." "Punish you? Jessica, why would I do that?" I asked, my voice full of a false, gentle innocence. "I was simply respecting your wishes. When you uninvited me, you made it very clear that my presence was an inconvenience. So I removed myself, and all the inconveniences attached to me. Like the venue, the photographer, the flowers, all the things I paid for." There was a muffled sound, and then a new voice, cold and sharp as broken glass, came on the line. "Helen, this is Eleanor." "Eleanor," I said, my back straightening. "What a surprise." "Cut the act," she snapped. "I don't know what kind of pathetic, vindictive game you think you're playing, but it's over. You have humiliated my son and your daughter. You will call that venue and reinstate every single one of those reservations this instant." It wasn't a request. It was a command from a woman who had never been disobeyed in her life. I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my chest, and for the first time, I let it out. It was a short, sharp, genuine laugh. The silence on her end was a testament to her shock. "Eleanor," I said when I'd recovered, "let me be very clear. I will be doing no such thing. The money from my house, the house my husband and I worked our entire lives for, paid for that wedding. It was a gift to my daughter. A gift that came with one unspoken condition, that her mother would be there to see her married. When you and she decided to revoke that invitation, you effectively threw the gift back in my face. So I'm keeping the gift, or what's left of it. You are throwing away a fortune out of spite, she hissed. No, I corrected her. I am investing it in a lesson. A very expensive lesson for my daughter on the consequences of her actions. And frankly, a lesson for you that you can't just buy and discard people as you see fit. You will regret this, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I already regret selling my home, I replied. I regret letting my daughter be so easily influenced by your money and your snobbery. I regret not standing up for myself sooner. But canceling that wedding? No, Eleanor. I suspect that's the first thing I'm not going to regret in a very long time. I didn't wait for her response. I simply hung up. My phone immediately began to ring again and again. Texts flooded in, a barrage of anger, pleading, and threats. I watched them come in, a digital tidal wave of their panic. Then I did something I hadn't done in 30 years. I turned my phone off. The silence that followed was absolute, final. The next 10 days were a blur of liberation. I went to the storage unit and opened a few boxes. I found my old photo albums, my husband's favorite books, my grandmother's china. They weren't ghosts anymore. They were parts of me, a life I had lived and cherished. I realized I hadn't sold my heart. I had just put it in storage for a while. I went shopping, not for sensible beige apartment things, but for things that made me feel alive. A brightly colored sundress, a wide-brimmed straw hat, a new novel by an author I loved, and a brand new enormous suitcase. The day of what would have been the wedding, I was in a taxi on the way to the airport. My new suitcase was in the trunk. A plane ticket to Bora Bora was in my purse. As we merged onto the highway, I turned my phone on for the first time in over a week. There were dozens of missed calls, voicemails, hundreds of texts from Jessica, Leo, even some from numbers I didn't recognize, angry bridesmaids perhaps. The last text from Jessica had come in that morning. Mom, please, I'm sorry. I love you. Please, just call me. I stared at the words. A year ago, they would have broken me. I would have forgiven everything, sold the other kidney if she'd asked. But now, they just seemed hollow. An apology born of desperation, not remorse. Love was not a weapon to be used to get what you wanted. I had finally learned that. My flight was called. I walked down the jet bridge, the scent of recycled air mixing with the faint coconut smell of my new sunscreen. I found my seat, a window seat, and settled in for the long flight. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the vast blue sky, I looked down at the city shrinking below. I thought of my little beige apartment, of the Grand Oak Manor sitting empty, of a girl in a wedding dress with nowhere to go. And I felt a pang, not of anger, not of revenge, but of a quiet, mournful pity. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on the deck of an overwater bungalow. The water below was a shade of turquoise so vivid it didn't seem real. A warm breeze rustled the palm fronds above me. In my hand was a cold drink with a little pink umbrella in it. My phone was nowhere in sight. I had spent my days reading, swimming, and talking to no one but the smiling staff who brought me fresh fruit. I had felt the steel in my spine soften, replaced by the gentle warmth of the tropical sun. I had bought this piece. I had paid for it with the wood and nails and memories of my old life. It was a steep price, but as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that it was worth every single penny. I had lost a daughter, but I had finally found myself. And it was a beautiful place to be.